Good afternoon, class. This is Professor Brennan. I'm here today to talk to my small group communication class about expressing yourselves in the small group, or another way to think about it is we will learn about verbal communication as opposed to nonverbal. But we're going to focus on language and our words and how we use them and how we use words in our attitude, and we bring all of that and how we say things and how that affects what is called the group climate. So it's a group experience, a group feeling atmosphere among group members, and really understanding the impact that we have on others and the group, because we're talking about small group communication. We're going to review a little bit about communication, the definition of communication. We're also going to review a little bit about different levels of communication, then we'll get into what I call group climate. So let's go there now. And the goal, I want you to keep this in mind, the goal of this in class, or one of the goals in class, is to create a space where you all feel comfortable to communicate. Okay, this is what I always have a goal as a teacher, that's what I'm interested in. I want you all to feel safe enough to be yourselves and communicate who you are, to be authentic, right? To show up, to be who you are, because honestly, who else are you going to be? So this is what you want in the group. You want to have that kind of group trust, that kind of cohesiveness, the group where you feel safe to express yourself. So before we even get to that, let's talk about defining communication. I want you to think about a minute if you can remember what the definition of communication is. Like, what are the first three words? Can you remember right now? Okay. It is the transactional process, right? A transactional process. Transaction, process, in which people simultaneously, so we're doing this thing that's happening at the same time where people are creating, interpreting, negotiating shared meaning through interaction. Okay, it's happening at the same time. I love that word simultaneous, right? Simultaneous happening at the same time. How's that even possible? But it shows how freaking crazy and how messy it is, right? How crazy and messy and intense. It's really intense. Communication is a transactional process in which people simultaneously create, interpret, and negotiate shared meaning through interaction. This definition comes from a book by Adam and Galanis, and Adams and Galanis, it's a small group theory or small group communication and theory book that I've used in other classes, and I always use this definition. It's a great definition. Okay, here we go. So let's look at some communication principles to keep this in mind as we talk about communication. First principle is understanding how language or communication, because we're talking about communication, but also nonverbal, but we're going to talk about in communication in general, the umbrella, okay? It's symbolic. And because we're talking about words and focusing on words, we're going to look at that as symbolic. Words are symbolic. You know, all the letters in a word are just letters. We've decided when we put them together, it means a word and it means a thing. Otherwise, it's meaningless, right? The letter A is meaningless. It's just this, someone constructed the A and that's that. They're all symbols for our language, right? If we're speaking Mandarin Chinese, there's letters, but they're totally different. And maybe they're just sounds. Maybe they're not even called letters. I don't speak Mandarin Chinese, so I don't know. I just know that it looks completely different. And even the way it's written is completely different. Like the order things are written is completely different than English, right? So keeping that in mind, all of that is symbolic. That it's culture bound. It's nation bound. It's country bound. It's part of someone's race or ethnicity. So all those things and we make sense of it, right? We make sense through understanding what the symbols, we agree upon what that is. And that's how it becomes personal. Communication is personal because it has some meaning to us. And remember, when we talked about culture, that all of those things, our background and where we come from and our life experience, our lived experience, affects how we perceive communication. It's both simultaneous and multi-directional. That's right there. That's basically what my definition says. And it's transactional. And finally, it's a sender and receiver phenomenon. So you need both sender and receiver in order to have communication. Communication doesn't happen without someone else there or some other living being there, right? I kind of believe that you could probably have communication with non-human animals because I think that there's enough evidence of that. But how they communicate usually is nonverbal, right? You can communicate non-verbally with your pets or other animals. Okay, so let's look at this in communication. We should break it down. Let's look at what I call the dimensions of communication. So basically, communication has two dimensions. So we have this content, that's what you're talking about, and you have the relational piece. Relational piece, that is the part that interprets what that message means. Okay? Whatever relationship you have with someone, you could say the same thing. Let's say you could say the same thing to your professor, and you'll probably say it differently to your spouse or your significant other or your girlfriend or your boyfriend. Okay? You're going to say it differently depending on what kind of relationship you have with that person. Maybe even the emphasis you put on certain words, but it will be different. The content could be the same, but how you say it is different. The relationship will determine how the message is expressed, and it also says something about that relationship. You could be in a situation where, think about this, you have a friend that you have feelings for, and like intimate feelings for, romantic feelings for. And the way you would say one thing, I don't know, 5 months ago, and now the way you say it, communicates to that person that you might feel more than just friends. Okay, with me? That's looking at the dimensions of communication. We're looking at verbal communication. All right, putting those together is how we figure out what it means. So if I say, hey, that's a great dress. Nice dress, I like it. Or if I say to my partner, that's a really nice dress. Okay, that's communicating something different. One, I'm like having enthusiasm to show how much I'm find that attractive, right? And then another way, I might just say to someone that's a colleague, that's a great dress, right? It's not appropriate for me to communicate interest, or it's the relationship is a platonic relationship. So I communicate in a platonic way. I think you guys got it. All right, moving on. Let's look at what we call the 4 levels of communication. And I took this from your textbook. It's another way of understanding how we move in communication at the different levels. Like think of levels as in depth. Okay, and there's 4 levels. The first level is what they call surface talk, and that's a kind of just, I always think like you're at a bus stop, right? And you just nod your head at someone, acknowledge someone's existence. It's really casual. You're not disclosing anything. This is the key. It's like really, ultimately, the 4th level is when you're disclosing, but you're not disclosing anything real. You're just kind of acknowledging someone's existence. The next thing is like reporting facts. Let's say you're again at the bus stop and you get in a conversation with someone and you start talking about things like, man, it's hot out here, and I really could I can't wait to get on the bus because at least the air conditioning will be on. And then the other person says, yeah, I heard it's like pretty humid and it's probably gonna rain, right? And then maybe you say, hey, do you know what stop to get off? Because I want to get to downtown. I'm not sure which stop that is. All right, you got it? That's reporting facts. So giving opinions. Now, this is taking communication to a little bit deeper level, right? When we give opinions, Now, I happen to be a person that I give opinions, even if I don't know the person that well, but that's just because of the way I am. But generally speaking, opinions really are, they are riskier because you're not really sure how someone might receive it. And if you're trying to make a good impression, or you're trying to get someone to like you or accept you, you might be hesitant to give your opinion because it is riskier, because it reveals more about you, how you feel about things. It usually reveals your values and your belief systems. And it can lead to disagreement, right? There's a possibility of conflict. So it's something, it is a deeper level, it's a risk. Hopefully in your group, you're at this, at least at this level, where you're able to give your opinions in a safe place. Okay. Shared feelings, or sharing feelings. This is when you know someone. You got to have some trust, right? We're not going to share our feelings with people that we don't know or feel like we don't know. But we have to feel a level of trust. So when for me as a teacher, if I felt I was in a class, and that really hasn't happened to me in my life, and I hope it never happens, but I haven't been in a class where the class was hostile toward me. Actually, I take that back. I did have one class early on where it was up and down, and I was a young teacher and didn't handle it very well. And I was less likely to share anything about myself. But if I feel a class is connecting with me, that the majority of students are connecting with me, and that I usually have to take the first step to reveal intimate information. But I only do that if there's some level of safety for me. If I think that I'm going to get backlash, and this is pretty subconscious, by the way, it's not something that I really think about it, consciously think about, but it's something that I have to feel. I have to feel a certain connection with the class as a whole, and maybe individuals in the class, for me to share and be vulnerable about my life or my experience. And that's what happens in a group, right? When people start sharing about what they really feel are their true selves, it's a statement about the safety that you've created in the group. And ultimately, honestly, even though your group is together to accomplish a task, this is what you're after, because this is where you all can get really real. And ultimately, you may think of this class as, look, I just got to get this class and get it over with and get the grade and go on. But life is about relationships. Life is about meeting each other. That's what life is truly about. It's not about making money or careers or whatever. And yes, those are important, but ultimately what you're going to remember is how people made you feel. And so if you get a chance in this group to make some connections, jump on that, because that will be meaning for you. I'm going to stop right there, and we'll pick up in the next video. Thanks for listening.